The night of June 13th, 2025 was unusually still over the Middle East, a region long accustomed to the hum of tension. But shortly after midnight, the skies erupted in a blaze of motion and purpose. Hundreds of Israeli warplanes sliced through the darkness, their engines roaring as they flew low and fast, evading radar detection with surgical precision. This was no ordinary military maneuver. It was the opening act of Operation Rising Lion, one of the most audacious strikes in Israel's history. The operation was not just an attack. It was a signal, a warning, and a calculated shift in the region's delicate balance of power. For years, Israel and Iran had been locked in a shadow war, a silent struggle of espionage, cyber attacks, and proxy conflicts. Israel's policy of silent deterrence had kept Iran's nuclear ambitions in check, but intelligence reports in early 2025 changed everything. Israeli satellites and human informants had detected feverish activity at Iran's nuclear sites, signaling that Tehran was days away from enriching uranium to weapons-grade levels, close to 60% purity. For Israel, this was the red line, the point of no return. Diplomacy, already strained by years of failed negotiations, was no longer an option. The Israeli government, under intense pressure, decided to act. The decision to launch Operation Rising Lion was made in a clandestine meeting of Israel's top security officials in Tel Aviv. Prime Minister Yair Lapid, flanked by Air Force generals and intelligence chiefs, reviewed the latest reports. Satellite imagery showed unusual activity at 5 key Iranian nuclear sites: Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan, Arak, and Bushehr. Human intelligence confirmed that Iran was accelerating its centrifuge operations, a clear sign of its intent to cross the nuclear threshold. "We cannot wait for the world to react," Lapid declared. "If Iran goes nuclear, the entire region, our existence, is at risk." The operation was a strategic gamble with global consequences. Israel's military planners had been running simulations for months, preparing for this moment. The Israeli Air Force, IAF, had mapped out every detail, from flight paths to target prioritization. The goal was clear: disrupt Iran's nuclear program before it became irreversible, while sending a message to both enemies and allies that Israel would not tolerate a nuclear-armed Iran. The operation was approved unanimously, with every move timed to maximize impact and minimize escalation. As the clock ticked past midnight, the first wave of Israeli jets took off from air bases across the country. The force was formidable, approximately 200 warplanes, including F-35 stealth fighters, F-15 strike aircraft, and F-16 multi-role jets, supported by aerial refueling tankers. These planes followed pre-planned routes over Jordan and Iraq, carefully avoiding heavily monitored airspace. Each aircraft was armed with advanced weaponry, including the Rock's air-to-surface missile, the Blue Arrow supersonic missile, and the Laura ballistic missile, designed for long-range precision strikes. The choice of weapons was deliberate. Israel needed to hit fortified and hidden targets without entering deep into Iranian airspace, reducing the risk of losing pilots to Iran's air defenses. The F-35s, with their stealth capabilities, played a critical role in identifying radar systems and guiding other aircraft to their targets. The F-15s and F-16s delivered the heavy firepower, using satellite data and real-time targeting to strike multiple locations simultaneously. Aerial refueling ensured the jets could cover the 1,000-mile distance to Iran and return safely, a logistical feat that underscored Israel's military prowess. The targets were carefully selected to cripple Iran's nuclear ambitions. Fordo, a heavily fortified site built deep inside a mountain, was the most challenging. Its advanced centrifuges were enriching uranium to dangerous levels, and its location symbolized Iran's secrecy and determination. Natanz, Iran's largest nuclear complex, housed both underground and above-ground facilities, including 2 major enrichment halls and a fuel production center. Isfahan's uranium conversion facility transformed raw uranium into gas for centrifuges, while Arak's unfinished heavy water reactor held potential for plutonium production. Bushehr, Iran's only active nuclear power plant, was targeted for its logistical infrastructure to hinder future expansion. Operation Rising Lion was more than a military strike. It was a statement of intent. As the jets roared toward their targets, the world, from Tel Aviv to Washington, Tehran to Moscow, watched in tense anticipation. The operation was about to unfold over several hours, targeting the heart of Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure. But to understand the full scope of this daring move, one must first grasp why the timing was so critical and how it fit into the broader Israel-Iran conflict. The skies over Iran were quiet as the first wave of Israeli jets approached their targets. Operation Rising Lion was designed as a three-phase assault, each phase with a specific objective to dismantle Iran's nuclear and military capabilities. The first wave focused on neutralizing Iran's early warning systems. Israeli F-35s, invisible to most radar, launched precision strikes against radar stations, air defense headquarters, and surface-to-air missile SAM sites in Tehran, Ilam, and Qusayr-e-Shirin. These initial strikes were critical, blinding Iran's defenses and clearing the way for subsequent waves. The second wave targeted Iran's offensive capabilities, specifically its ballistic and hypersonic missile bases. Facilities housing the Fatah-1 and Shahab-3 missiles, capable of reaching Israel and US bases up to 2,000 kilometers away, were hit with devastating accuracy. Launch pads, mobile units, and underground storage areas were obliterated, limiting Iran's ability to retaliate. The third wave struck Iran's military production and logistics centers, including the Qadiri barracks, Imam Ali base, and Hassan Khan Castle. These sites served as command hubs and supply lines for Iran's regional proxy forces, such as Hezbollah and militias in Syria and Iraq. Israel's use of advanced technology was a game-changer. Long-range smart weapons and kamikaze drones allowed the IAF to strike from outside Iranian airspace, minimizing the risk to pilots. GPS-guided missiles and drones with imaging systems hit precise targets, such as the secretive Parchin military base linked to missile development and nuclear research. The Roxham Blue Arrow missiles, equipped with infrared guidance, could lock onto moving targets, while the Laura ballistic missile, launched from high altitudes, dived at a 90-degree angle to penetrate fortified bunkers with minimal warning. The coordination was flawless. Aerial refueling tankers trailed behind, enabling the jets to maintain their long-range operations. Real-time satellite data guided the strikes, ensuring maximum impact. The F-35's stealth capabilities allowed them to evade Iran's radar, while the F-15s and F-16s delivered the heavy payloads. The operation's success hinged on surprise, and Israel's planners had ensured that Iran was caught off guard. Iran's air defenses, however, were not idle. The Bavar 373, Iran's answer to the Russian S-300, was deployed with its Sayyad-4 missiles, capable of tracking threats up to 450 kilometers away. Its Moral-4 phased-array radar could monitor 200 targets simultaneously, making it a formidable first line of defense. Iran also employed Russian-supplied S-300 systems, designed to intercept aircraft and cruise missiles. Yet despite these advanced systems, Iran's defenses struggled to counter Israel's onslaught. The steep dive angles of missiles like the Laura and the infrared seekers on GPS-guided bombs made interception nearly impossible. While Iran managed to shoot down a few drones and missiles, most of Israel's strikes hit their targets, causing widespread destruction. The nuclear sites at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan suffered severe damage, with centrifuges and enrichment halls reduced to rubble. Arak's heavy water reactor and Bushehr's logistical infrastructure were similarly crippled. The strikes exposed vulnerabilities in Iran's air defenses, raising questions about its ability to protect itself in future conflicts. Iran's air force was equally unprepared. Its fleet, consisting of 64 F-4 Phantom jets, 40 F-14 Tomcats, and 30 MiG-29s, was outdated, relying on 1960s and 1970s technology. These aircraft, once formidable, lacked the radar, weapons, and electronic warfare capabilities to challenge Israel's modern F-35s and drones. poor maintenance and limited spare parts further hampered their effectiveness. As a result, Iran's air force could not mount a meaningful response, leaving its skies open to Israel's dominance. The operation's precision and scale sent shockwaves through Iran's military establishment. Among the most significant losses was General Hossein Salami, a senior commander in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, reportedly killed in a strike on a command center. His death was a blow to Iran's leadership, disrupting its ability to coordinate a swift response. The destruction of missile bases, radar systems, and military factories further weakened Iran's war-fighting capacity, setting back its nuclear and missile programs by months, if not years. Operation Rising Lion was not just about destruction, it was a carefully crafted message to Iran and the world. By striking deep inside Iranian territory with precision and coordination, Israel demonstrated its ability to hit fortified targets without committing ground forces or risking significant losses. The use of stealth jets, mid-air refueling and long-range missiles showcased a level of military sophistication that few nations could match. This was a warning not only to Iran but also to global powers like the United States, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, as well as non-state actors like Hezbollah. Israel's policy of preemptive defense was at the heart of the operation. For decades, Israeli officials had vowed to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear-armed state. The strikes on uranium enrichment sites, missile factories and underground bunkers were a direct manifestation of that commitment. By acting unilaterally, Israel signaled its willingness to take decisive action even without international support. The timing, just days after reports confirmed Iran's near-weapons-grade uranium enrichment, underscored the urgency of the situation. The operation also tested the international community's response. The silence from the United States and NATO was deafening, raising questions about their stance. Would they ignore Israel's actions or push for stricter measures against Iran? The strikes put global powers in a difficult position. Supporting Israel risked escalating tensions with Iran, while condemning it could embolden Tehran. Russia, a key ally of Iran, watched closely, its own strategic interest in the region at stake. For Iran's proxies, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and militias in Syria and Iraq, the operation was a chilling reminder of Israel's reach. If Iran's heavily defended nuclear sites could be struck with such precision, smaller proxy forces were even more vulnerable. Hezbollah, heavily reliant on Iranian funding and weapons, issued threats of retaliation, but its leaders were forced to reassess their position. The strikes disrupted Iran's supply chains to these groups, weakening their operational capabilities. The immediate aftermath of the operation was tense. Iran's government, while not confirming the full extent of the damage, vowed to respond. Military analysts predicted a range of possible retaliatory actions: missile strikes on Israeli targets, cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, or asymmetric attacks through proxies. Hezbollah, with its arsenal of rockets, posed a significant threat, while militias in Syria and Iraq could target US or Israeli interests in the region. The risk of escalation was palpable, with the potential for a broader regional conflict. Israel's leaders, however, were prepared for this possibility. The operation had been designed to minimize escalation, with strikes carefully calibrated to avoid mass civilian casualties. Yet, the destruction of Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure was a humiliation for Tehran, one that demanded a response. The killing of General Salami added a personal dimension to Iran's resolve, as his loss was both symbolic and strategic. The international community's silence raised further questions. The United States, with troops stationed across the Middle East, faced the possibility of being drawn into the conflict if Iran targeted its interests. NATO, already grappling with its own security challenges, could be pulled into a broader crisis. Regional powers like Saudi Arabia and Turkey, wary of Iran's ambitions, quietly supported Israel's actions but were cautious about openly aligning with it. Operation Rising Lion had shifted the balance of power in the Middle East. By crippling Iran's nuclear program and missile capabilities, Israel had gained a temporary advantage. However, the long-term consequences were uncertain. Would Iran rebuild its program in secret? Could its proxies destabilize the region further? And how would global powers navigate this new reality? The answers lay in the days and weeks ahead, as the region braced for Iran's response. Israel's leaders, however, were prepared for this possibility. The operation had been designed to minimize escalation, with strikes carefully calibrated to avoid mass civilian casualties. Yet, the destruction of Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure was a humiliation for Tehran, one that demanded a response. The killing of General Salami added a personal dimension to Iran's resolve, as his loss was both symbolic and strategic. The international community's silence raised further questions. The United States, with troops stationed across the Middle East, faced the possibility of being drawn into the conflict if Iran targeted its interests. NATO, already grappling with its own security challenges, could be pulled into a broader crisis. Regional powers like Saudi Arabia and Turkey, wary of Iran's ambitions, quietly supported Israel's actions but were cautious about openly aligning with it. Operation Rising Lion had shifted the balance of power in the Middle East. By crippling Iran's nuclear program and missile capabilities, Israel had gained a temporary advantage. However, the long-term consequences were uncertain. Would Iran rebuild its program in secret? Could its proxies destabilize the region further? And how would global powers navigate this new reality? The answers lay in the days and weeks ahead, as the region braced for Iran's response. Operation Rising Lion was a turning point, a moment that would shape the Middle East for years to come. The operation's success was undeniable. Israel had dealt a severe blow to Iran's nuclear ambitions, destroying key facilities and disrupting its military infrastructure. The strikes on Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan, Arak, and Bushehr had set back Iran's program significantly, while the targeting of missile bases and command centers weakened its ability to project power. The reported death of General Hossein Salami was a further setback, disrupting Iran's military leadership at a critical moment. Yet the operation's true impact went beyond the battlefield. It was a demonstration of Israel's technological and strategic superiority, a reminder that it could strike anywhere in the region with precision and minimal risk. The use of advanced weaponry, stealth tactics, and real-time intelligence had set a new standard for preemptive warfare. For Israel, the operation was a reaffirmation of its commitment to survival in a hostile region, a message that it would act decisively to protect its interests. For Iran, the strikes were a wake-up call. Its air defenses, once touted as formidable, had been outmatched by Israel's technology. The outdated state of its air force, reliant on aging American and Russian jets, left it vulnerable to modern threats. The destruction of its missile bases and nuclear facilities exposed weaknesses in its military infrastructure, forcing Tehran to reassess its strategy. Rebuilding would take time, resources, and political will, all of which were now under strain. The risk of escalation loomed large. Iran's leaders, humiliated by the strikes, faced domestic pressure to retaliate. Missile attacks, cyber attacks, or proxy operations were all on the table, each carrying the potential to spark a wider conflict. Hezbollah, with its thousands of rockets aimed at Israel, was a wild card, capable of turning a localized conflict into a regional war. Syria, already a battleground for competing powers, could become a flashpoint if Iran's proxies mobilized. The involvement of US or NATO forces, should their interest be targeted, could escalate the situation further, drawing in global powers. The operation also reshaped alliances in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states, long wary of Iran's influence, quietly welcomed Israel's actions but remained cautious about public support. Turkey, with its own regional ambitions, watched the developments closely, weighing its options. The Abraham Accords, which had normalized ties between Israel and several Arab states, gained new significance, a shared concern. For the United States, the operation posed a strategic dilemma. Supporting Israel risked antagonizing Iran and its allies, while staying neutral could undermine its credibility as a regional power. The Biden administration, already navigating domestic and global challenges, faced pressure to respond if American interests were threatened. The silence from Washington in the immediate aftermath of the strike suggested a wait-and-see approach. But the potential for escalation demanded a clear strategy. Operation Rising Lion had set a precedent for preemptive warfare in the 21st century. It demonstrated the power of technology, strategy, and timing in shaping the future of nations. For Israel, it was a moment of triumph, a bold assertion of its strength and resolve. For Iran, it was a setback that exposed vulnerabilities and demanded a response. For the world, it was a reminder of the fragility of peace in the Middle East, where a single night of strikes could ignite a chain of events with far-reaching consequences. As the dust settled, the region stood at a crossroads. Would Iran retaliate, risking a broader war? Could diplomacy, long sidelined, find a way to de-escalate tensions? And how would global powers navigate this new reality? The answers would determine the political and military future of the Middle East, and perhaps the world for years to come. Operation Rising Lion was not just a military strike. It was a message written in fire across the skies, a warning that the balance of power could shift in an instant. Operation Rising Lion left an unforgettable message in the skies of the Middle East. Israel's bold action not only halted Iran's nuclear ambitions, but also issued a clear warning to global powers. This story is far from over. Iran's response, the region's future, and the reactions of world powers remain to be seen. Stay connected for more analyses and updates on this saga. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe our channel for such deep insights. Operation Rising Lion left an unforgettable message in the skies of the Middle East. Israel's bold action not only halted Iran's nuclear ambitions, but also issued a clear warning to global powers. This story is far from over. Iran's response, the region's future, and the reactions of world powers remain to be seen. Stay connected for more analyses and updates on this saga. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe our channel for such deep insights.